Hey, this is Richie here, fan of football 813, and these are my week 3 college football reviews. There were a lot of games this week, a lot of stuff going on, so let's jump in for a little bit of R&R. So because of Hurricane Florence in the Carolinas, there were some games that were moved around, moved up, changed to different days, or canceled entirely. So it was kind of an interesting week. Our first game was actually on Wednesday. It was at 2 p.m. It was between the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers and the 1AA Campbell Fighting Camels. And it was kind of back and forth in the beginning. Campbell was actually up 21-10 at one time. Their quarterback, Daniel Smith, passed for 218 yards and a touchdown. And he ran a little bit for 15 yards and a touchdown. But from there, it was just all Coastal Carolina as Coastal Carolina ended up winning 58-21. The quarterback for Coastal Carolina, Kilton Anderson, he was 10 of 14 for 202 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. But at one point in the first half, he was 8 for 8 for 174 and 3 touchdowns. And the backup got in, Bryce Carpenter. He threw for a touchdown. He was actually Mr. Football, and he's going and playing at Coastal Carolina. They ran for 333 yards as an offense. They had a 81-yard touchdown reception and just walked away with it. So going into the next game, one of the other games that was moved was Old Dominion Monarchs against the Charlotte 49ers. That was actually played on Thursday at 4 o'clock. And it was a really good back and forth game. Old Dominion and Charlotte, they kept going back and forth, and Charlotte ended up winning at the end 28-25 behind their freshman quarterback Chris Reynolds, who's looked really good so far this year. He was 23 of 34 for 202 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he ran for 23 yards. Their running back, Benny LeMay, ran for 93 yards. They were able to keep it in. They had a linebacker, Anthony Butler, had 11 tackles. For Old Dominion, they were to keep it. Their quarterback, he did okay. He passed for 215, a touchdown, but he did throw 2 interceptions, which isn't good. They had a wide receiver, Jonathan Duhart. He had 7 receptions for 127 and a touchdown. But really, I actually want to call out a defensive player for Old Dominion. His name is Lawrence Garner, and he had 15 tackles in the game. And so far this year, his first game he had 11 tackles, second game had 16 tackles and 15 tackles. So he's already one of the top linebackers in the nation statistically. However, that wasn't enough to stop Charlotte in this game. So going into the Thursday night game, the Boston College Eagles took on the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, and this was a really good game. It was back and forth. It was high scoring. The Boston College Eagles, man, their running back, A.J. Dillon, he's one of the best in the country. He had 33 carries for 185 yards and a touchdown. However, a little bit surprisingly, their quarterback, Anthony Brown, he's the one that really stole the show. He threw for 304 yards and 5 touchdown passes to no interceptions. Their wide receiver, Jess Smith, had 6 receptions for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wake Forest, they were to keep it close to their offense. Sam Hartman, he's a redshirt freshman quarterback. He was 20 of 45, which isn't very good, but it was 214, 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. And they had 2 guys run for over 100 yards on offense. They had Matt Coburn, who had 23 carries for 117 and a touchdown, and then Cade Carney ran for 160 yards and a touchdown himself. Wake Forest actually, they had a sack. The Boston College defense had 4 sacks in that game. They had 2 interceptions. And it was just a dose of A.J. Dillon and Anthony Brown going over the top was too much for Wake Forest. The next game for Thursday night was the Utah State Aggies as they took on the Tennessee Tech Golden Eagles from 1AA, and this was not even a contest. Utah State won 73-12. It was 45-9 at halftime. Quarterback Jordan Love, he threw for 236 and 2 touchdowns. As a team, they had 7 rushing touchdowns, with Darwin Thompson leading the way with 107 yards rushing and a touchdown, only 6 carries. They had a punt return for a touchdown, and they were too much. Tennessee Tech really did not have anything going on in that game. So that leads to the next game. So the Friday night game, the Georgia State Panthers against the Memphis Tigers, and Memphis ended up winning 59-22. Memphis, they have a really good offense. Their quarterback, he was a transfer. He threw for 269, and he had 5 touchdown passes. And Darrell Henderson ran for 233 yards and 2 touchdowns, only 14 carries. He's one of the best running backs, I should say. In the group of 5 for sure, maybe the country, one of the most explosive players. They had a receiver, DeMonte Coxey, had 6 receptions for 123 and 2 touchdowns as well. Georgia State, they weren't really in it. They were down 21-3 after the first quarter. They did have a defensive touchdown at the end, but Memphis was too much to overcome for them. All right, going in. All right, the Alabama Crimson Tide took on the Ole Miss Rebels, and I thought this would be a little bit closer. Ole Miss started the game, first place, 75-yard touchdown pass, but it was all roll Tide from there as the Tide won 62-7. They were up 28-7 at halftime. They were up 28-7 at the first quarter. It was 49-7 at halftime. Quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, he was 11 of 15, 191 and 2 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts comes in, 7 of 10, 85 yards, 2 touchdowns. They ran for 210 yards as an offense. Jerry Jeudy had 3 catches for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. They had a defensive touchdown, and it was just all tied. They're really looking like the best team in the country right now. I mean, they held Jordan Ta'amu, who was on fire so far at quarterback for Ole Miss. He was 7 of 22 for 133, that long touchdown, but he threw 2 interceptions. It was just, they had 4 sacks for Alabama. It was kind of ugly after a while. All right, next game, the Georgia Southern Eagles took on the Clemson Tigers, and this is a game Clemson, they kind of struggled with. It was 0-0 after the first quarter. Clemson did go up 21-0 at halftime, but Georgia Southern, they have their offense and defense play pretty well. Well enough to at least keep it close. They lost 38-7, but those are the type of games Clemson normally has 38 by halftime, not just the whole game. Their freshman quarterback Trevor Lawrence, he threw for 194 yards, a touchdown and a pick, which is fine. They had a receiver, Justin Ross, had 3 catches for 103 and a touchdown. Their running backs, they ran for 309 yards as an offense, with Travis Etienne going for 162 yards and 2 touchdowns. But Clemson's defense is really what won it, because Georgia Southern normally runs for well over 300 yards a game, and they held them down to 83 yards rushing and only 143 yards of total offense. The next game, the Georgia Bulldogs took on the Middle Tennessee State Blue Raiders. Middle Tennessee, they have one of the better quarterbacks in the group of 5 in Brent Stockstill, but it was Georgia all the way. Quarterback Jake Fromm was 10 of 12 for 128 and 3 touchdowns. The backup Justin Fields came in, threw a touchdown. Elijah Holyfield, yes, that is Evander Holyfield's son. He ran for 100 yards on only 8 carries. They pretty much did whatever they wanted in this game. They had a punt return for a touchdown, and the Bulldogs won 49-7. Next one, Ohio State Buckeyes against the TCU Horned Frogs. This was where game day was last week. It was one of the most anticipated games of the early season, and it was a really good game. Ohio State did win 40-28, but it was back and forth, and Ohio State, they won the game later on. Quarterback Dwayne Haskins, if he's not on the short list for the Heisman right now, he should be. He threw for 344, 2 touchdowns, did not turn over against what is normally one of the best defenses in the country at TCU. Running back J.K. Dobbins ran for 121 yards. Haskins added a rushing touchdown. Wide receiver KJ Hill had 95 yards receiving and touchdown. They had a defensive touchdown. In TCU, to their credit, Sean Robinson, he threw for 308 yards and a touchdown. He did throw 2 interceptions, which cost them. But their running back, Darius Anderson, had 12 carries for 154 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a school record 93-yard touchdown run. It was just blazing. Jalen Rieger had 7 receptions for 98 yards. It was really a fun game. It was back and forth. But Ohio State just proved to be a little too much in the end. And Dwayne Haskins, he's on the Heisman list. The next game, Oklahoma Sooners and Iowa State Cyclones. Iowa State shocked Oklahoma last season and beat them, and they almost did it again. Oklahoma won 37-27, and this game was back and forth. Oklahoma was up 24-10. At one point, Iowa State came within 7. Oklahoma got up by 10 again. Iowa State brought it back, and that was with their backup quarterback, Kyle Kemp. He was injured, so Zeb Nolan came in. He threw for 360 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Hakeem Butler, he had 2 really long touchdown receptions, great plays where he broke a bunch of tackles. He had 174 yards and 2 touchdowns, only 5 receptions. But Oklahoma's offense was a little too much. Kyler Murray, he's also on the short list for Heisman, I would say. He threw for 348 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and ran for 77 yards. Marquise Brown, one of the top wide receivers in the country, all he did was 191 yards and a touchdown. And that's what Oklahoma needed to be able to win that game, 37-27. All right, one of the upsets of the weekend, the BYU Cougars took down the previously number 6 Wisconsin Badgers, and BYU won 24-21, and it was a very close. Obviously, it was a close game, but they were basically mirror image of each other. They run the ball, they play good defense. Wisconsin, Jonathan Taylor, he's still up there for the Heisman in my opinion. He ran for 117 yards, but BYU has a running back, Squally Canada, and that is his name. It's an interesting name, but he's a hell of a player. He ran for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns himself. And, BYU, they were able to come out with that victory up in Wisconsin, and, congrats to BYU getting one of the early upsets of the weekend, and there were quite a few this weekend. The LSU Tigers playing an Auburn Tigers. Speaking of an upset, a minor one though, but LSU got a last-second field goal to edge the Auburn Tigers 22-21. Quarterback Joe Burrow is so interesting. He was 15 of 34 for 249, but he threw a touchdown and no interceptions. That's the 3rd game in a row that he completed 50% or lower. But they're 3-0. They held their defense, did well to hold the Auburn offense down. Jarrett Stidham, the quarterback for Auburn, he threw 2 interceptions. Auburn, they did have a guy go over 100 yards rushing. Jatarvius Whitlow ran for 104 and a touchdown, but they were held to 130 yards rushing as a team. And, it was just one of those good old-fashioned slobber knockers of a game. Defense won, and LSU prevailed in that one with one of the upsets of the weekend. All right, the Vanderbilt Commodores took on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and I said last week that Notre Dame should be on upset alert, and they almost lost. Vanderbilt almost went in there and won. Notre Dame won 22-17. Brandon Wimbush for Notre Dame, he didn't play too well. 122. They passed for 13. They had a running back, Tony Jones, run for 118 yards. They ran for 245 as an offense. Kyle Shermer, the Vanderbilt quarterback, he threw for 326 and a touchdown and a pick. Jared Pinkney had 111 yards and a touchdown. Kaliza Lipscomb had 11 catches for 89 yards. So it was it was a close game, back and forth, and Notre Dame just found a way to come out with it in the end. All right, the Stanford Cardinal took on 1AA UC Davis, and Stanford kind of slept their way through this one. UC Davis was up 3-0 at halftime. Stanford was up 17-3 then at halftime, and they won 30-10. They were without running back Bryce Love, who was injured. KJ Costello, the quarterback, threw for 214, but 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. He's going to have to cut down on that because they go to Oregon next weekend. If their offense is not up to snuff, Oregon may just blow them out of the water. But I think Stanford kind of used this game to get most of their players healthy and just move on to the next weekend. The Washington Huskies took on the Utah Utes, and I figured this might be a close game. Both teams are really good on defense. Both teams can be good on offense, but this year they kind of been struggling. Washington did win 21-7. Jake Browning at quarterback, he was okay, 155, a touchdown, a pick. The running back, Myles Gaskin, he was really the soul of the team for that night. He ran for 143 yards and a touchdown. Their wide receiver, Aaron Fuller, had 108 yards receiving. But it was mostly their defense was able to stop the Utah offense. and held them to 7 points and held them 123 rushing yards, and it was kind of a slugfest that Washington survived. The next game, the Kent State Golden Flashes took on the Penn State Nittany Lions, and this was not even close. The Nittany Lions won 63-10. Quarterback Tracy McSorley, he may be up there for a Heisman. He's looking pretty good. He was only 11-22, which that completion percentage needs to go up, but he threw for 229, 2 touchdowns, and he also added 54 yards rushing and 3 rushing touchdowns, so he had 5 total on his own. Miles Sanders ran for 86 yards and a touchdown. DeAndre Tompkins had 101 yards receiving and a touchdown. They had 7 sacks as a defense, and it wasn't really close at all. Kent State just couldn't, handle them. The Louisiana Raging Cajuns took on the Mississippi State Bulldogs. The quarterback for Mississippi State, Nick Fitzgerald, he had a good game. He was 14 of 21 for 243, 2 touchdowns, and he ran for 107 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he's looking really good. The running back, Eris Williams, ran for 101 yards and a touchdown. And they were pretty much able to do whatever they wanted in this game, moving it all over the field. Louisiana, they didn't. Andre Nunes was okay, 21-29, 224, touchdown a pick, but it was all Mississippi State in that one. All right, one of the games I anticipated most, but it didn't quite live up to what I was hoping, was the Oklahoma State Cowboys taking on the Boise State Broncos. Oklahoma State ended up winning 44-21. However, Oklahoma State did block 2 punts. One was recovered for a touchdown, and one was recovered on the 7-yard line, which gave them a short field to go in. But, to their credit, their defense was able to somewhat neutralize Boise State's offense. Brett Ripien for Boise State, he did throw for 380 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he didn't turn it over. He didn't throw an interception. But Oklahoma State, they were able to sack him 7 times. And that was kind of it. It was that defense and those 2 block punts was kind of the difference in the game. Quarterback Oklahoma State, Taylor Cornelius, he threw for 243 and a touchdown. And he ran for 41 yards, chipped in 2 rushing touchdowns himself. Justice Hill, one of the best running backs in the nation, I believe, he ran for 123 yards and a touchdown as well. He might be on at least the list for the Doak Walker Award, which is given to the best running back, and maybe Heisman. Who knows? Tylan Wallace, they have a bunch of wide receivers at Oklahoma State, and this guy came out of nowhere with 105 yards receiving. So Oklahoma State had a nice victory in their cap there. The next game, Michigan Wolverines took on the SMU Mustangs. It was 0-0 after the first quarter, but then Michigan was able to find themselves. Michigan won 45-20. Shea Patterson threw for 237, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Their running game ran for 197 as a team. They played pretty well defensively. They had an interception, a long interception return for a touchdown right before halftime. SMU, they really couldn't do a whole lot. Ben Hicks, he didn't look very good, but then their backup came in, William Brown, and threw for 82 yards and 2 touchdowns. James Proche, he's one of the better wide receivers in the group of 5, at the very least in the American Athletic Conference. He had 11 catches for 166 and 2 touchdowns, but Michigan was too much for them there. The Oregon Ducks took on the San Jose State Spartans, and Oregon won 35-22, but they kind of, they were up 21-0 at one point, and they kind of slept a little bit, though. They kind of walked through it. Hopefully, they were just getting themselves mentally prepared, because next week they take on the Stanford Cardinal, which I'll break down in my previews later. But, it was just kind of a solid win. Justin Herbert, he wasn't very good completion percentage-wise, 16 of 34. He threw 2 interceptions, which he really needs to cut down on, but he threw for 309 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their offense, they were moving it well enough. Defensively, they did have 4 sacks. They held San Jose State to 29 total yards rushing. Josh Love, the quarterback for San Jose State, threw for 238 and a touchdown, but he threw 2 interceptions and was below 50% as well. So it was kind of it was one of those things where Oregon didn't really have many injuries, and they came out with the win, and they can move on. So the Miami Hurricanes, it was interesting. They took on a MAC school up in where that school is, which in this case is the Toledo Rockets up in Ohio. And normally those kind of games, the bigger, more well-established school doesn't travel to these places, and it could have been a bit of a trap game. Toledo, they normally have a really good offense, as I've touted before. They might have the best wide receiving core in the country, which is proof. Deontay Johnson, one of those 3 wide receivers, had 119 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. The quarterback for Toledo, Mitchell Guadani, he passed for 222, 2 touchdowns, and ran for 47 yards, but Miami ended up winning this one 49-24. Malik Rozier, he passed for 205, 2 touchdowns, and he ran for 80 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. He had 5 total. DJ Dallas had 110 yards rushing and a touchdown. Jeff Thomas had 105 yards receiving and a touchdown. And Miami was able to come out with this one unscathed. Alright, the USC Trojans took on the Texas Longhorns. And technically this was an upset because USC was ranked and Texas was not. But I picked Texas, I believe. And Texas, they were down 14-3 and then came back and won 37-14. But, man, everybody's touting USC. You weren't that good anyway. I don't think this means Texas is that good either. I don't think they're back. But they had a really good game, at least for that night. I mean, the quarterback, Sam Ehlinger, he threw for 223 and 2 touchdowns. But he was 15 of 33. How do you kill USC completing less than 50% of your passes? How does USC let that? That doesn't tell me that USC was really any good in the first place. The quarterback for USC, he was 30, 48, 322, but he threw a pick and no touchdowns. They ran for -5 yards as a team. But pretty much all they had was Amon-Ra St. Brown. He had 9 catches for 167 yards. Otherwise, it was just Texas's game, and USC couldn't stop him. I think both are overrated, to be honest. So the next game, Arizona State Sun Devils took on the San Diego State Aztecs, and as I predicted, San Diego State had this upset, quote unquote. The running back, you guys keep sleeping on him. Jawan Washington ran for 138 yards and a touchdown against this Arizona State defense, against this Pac-12 team. Even their running back, Chase Jasmine, the backup, ran for 112 yards. They ran for 311 yards as a team against Arizona State. Arizona State offensively, they were down most of the game. They came back late. They made a game of it. Manny Wilkins, the quarterback for ASU, was 31 of 46 for 341, 2 touchdowns and no picks. Frank Darby had 5 catches, 127. And Kilharry, one of the best, maybe the best receiver in the country, had 9 catches for 86 yards and a touchdown. There was a bit of a controversial ending, which I don't believe is controversial at all. Arizona State had a receiver catch a ball at the 3-yard line. San Diego State hit him really hard and knocked the ball loose, and San Diego State was called for targeting, which was the correct call, but because of the hit, it knocked the ball loose and made it an incomplete pass. People are saying that, the targeting, Arizona State should have kept the ball at the 3 because the ball came loose due to the targeting. That's a bullshit thing. Like, if it was a big hit, if that was a clean hit and it came loose, then nobody would say anything. It just so happened to be a targeting, and San Diego State did end up getting a first down because it was 4th down, and they had another shot and they didn't make it. People are dumb, but San Diego State had the upset with this one, and it was a nice victory for them. The UConn Huskies took on 1AA Rhode Island, and man, this was back and forth. It was UConn won 56-49. Their defense couldn't do anything, but luckily they had David Pendle on offense at quarterback, who threw for 308 yards, 4 touchdowns, and ran for 137 yards and 2 more touchdowns. Kevin Mensah had 144 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Let's throw out the Rhode Island quarterback. Jawan Lawson threw for 351, 4 touchdowns, added 85 yards rushing, and 2 touchdowns. They had 2 guys go over 100 yards receiving. Isaiah Coulter, 10 catches, 156 and a touchdown. Aaron Parker, 7 catches, 128 and a touchdown. There was no defense in that game, but UConn came out with the win at the end of that one. All right, the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors took on the Army Knights, and this was a good game. You had two completely opposite offenses. Hawaii, they pass it all around. Army is a triple option. They run it every down, and Army came out with the win in this, 28-21. Their quarterback, he was 6 of 10 for 162. He ran for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. They ran for 303 yards as a team. And that was part of their strategy. They had the ball for over 41 minutes, which means Hawaii only had it for 18. And yet, even for those 18 minutes, Hawaii still put up 21. And their quarterback, Cole McDonald, only threw for 321 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, which is his season low so far. So if your season low is over 300 yards, you're doing something right. And he still has not thrown an interception this year. They had John Ursua. I talked to you guys about him before last season. He was one of the tops in the country for the first 6 games, and then he got hurt and missed the rest of the season. He had 123 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. But Army, they held the ball long enough, and Hawaii had a chance late to tie it, and Army knocked the ball away. So Army ended up with that victory there. All right, one of the more minor upsets, the Troy Trojans defeated the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and the Troy went in there and won 24-19. Nebraska out of the Big Ten, Troy's at Sunbelt, but they won 10 games last year and did beat LSU last year, which people forget. They had a punt return for a touchdown. Their quarterback, Barker, he didn't do a whole lot, but they ran for 142 yards as a team. Their running back, B.J. Smith, ran for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their defense played really well. Nebraska, Andrew Bunch, he was in at quarterback because their starter, Adrian Martinez, is out. He threw for 177, 2 touchdowns, but he threw two interceptions, one late, which ended up costing them the game or a chance to maybe take the lead and win. But Troy, they had a really good victory there. All right. The Florida State Seminoles went into Syracuse, and Syracuse dominated. It was only 6-0 at halftime, but it very easily could have been at least 14-0. They got down inside the 20, inside the 10 a couple times, and got stuffed and had 2 short field goals. But Syracuse won 30-7. It was not pretty. DeAndre Francois. I'm sorry, Florida State fans, he's not very good. 18 of 36, 178, and a touchdown. They ran for 62 yards as a team. Syracuse just did whatever they wanted, and that was with their backup. Their starter, Eric Dungy, he did play. He did start them off, but he got hurt at one point, and freshman Tommy DeVito came in, was 11 of 16 for 144 and a touchdown. They ran for 222 yards as a team, and it was just all Syracuse. Yeah, I hate to say it, but FSU, they're not looking good offensively or defensively. Syracuse, I picked to win. They have a good offense. But Florida State, man, I watched that game. And I watched most of them, but I really was paying attention, and that was ugly. All right, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights took on the Kansas Jayhawks, and Kansas, you know what? I thought you might go totally defeated, but you got your second win. You put up 55. Yeah, it's Rutgers, which they're not a very good team, but you weren't either. And you won 55-14. They had 4 rushing touchdowns at Puka Williams Jr. Puka, what the hell? 158 yards rushing and a touchdown. They had 2 interception returns for touchdowns. They kind of just did what they wanted with this game. Rutgers wasn't really able to do a lot. Their running back, Raheem Blackshear, did run for 102 yards. But their starter, Artur Sitkowski, was 7 of 19, 47 yards and 3 interceptions. Kansas, they're looking good so far, at least through the first couple of games. All right, Indiana Hoosiers took on the Ball State Cardinals. A bit of an in-state rivalry. Ball State is in Indiana. But the Hoosiers won 38-10. Peyton Ramsey, quarterback, threw for 173 yards, but really it was the running game. Stevie Scott ran for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns. They ran for 255 as a team. The running back for Ball State, James Gilbert, he's pretty good. He ran for 89 yards and a touchdown. They did run for 204 yards against them, but they couldn't put up the points. Indiana had a really good victory at that, and they started 3-0, which doesn't happen often at Indiana, so they're halfway to a bowl game right now. One of the mini surprises I felt like, the Temple Owls took on the Maryland Terrapins. Maryland came in 2-0. They had beaten Texas. They looked good in their second game against Bowling Green. Temple Owls had lost to a winnable team, and they lost another. But the Temple Owls ended up winning 35-14, and it really wasn't that close. Maryland's touchdowns were an interception, return for a touchdown, and a blocked field goal return, or blocked punt return for a touchdown. So it was really just Temple shut them out. Their quarterback Frank Nuttall was hurt, so Anthony Russo came in, passed for 228 and a touchdown. Raquel Armstead ran for 118 yards. They did have a trick play on a punt that they passed for a touchdown. The running back for Maryland, Anthony McFarland, did rush for 107 yards, but it was Temple. They played great defensively, held Maryland to 63 yards passing, and played well enough offensively to get a win. The Kentucky Wildcats took on the 1AA Murray State Racers. Kentucky, they struggled in the first half, but they ended up winning 48-10 there. Their quarterback, passed for 163. He ran for 80 yards and a touchdown. They ran for 245 as a team. They pretty much, they did what they needed to do. That's the kind of game you just want to come out with a win. You don't want people hurt. Murray State didn't really do a whole lot, so Kentucky finished them off. All right, the Tennessee Volunteers took on the UTEP Miners, and UTEP, they went 0-12 last year, and they gave Tennessee a game. Tennessee won 24-0, which normally would look good, but it should have been 24-0 at halftime against UTEP, and it was only 10-0 at halftime. They scored late in the fourth to go up. Their quarterback, Jarek Garantano, 168 and a touchdown. They had a running back, Ty Chandler, run for 158 yards and a touchdown. Their defense played well enough against the offense. It's not very good. Kay Loxley, the quarterback for UTEP, was 9-22 for 39 yards. They ran for 95 yards, UTEP did. Tennessee's got a big game against the Gators next week. They should tighten some stuff up, or I don't know, they might lose that one. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets took on the Pitt Panthers, and this was close in the end, but Pitt actually, they were up 21-0. Pitt ended up winning 24-19. Their running back, Quadri Allison, he ran for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kenny Pickett, he did okay, 197, but no interceptions. The Georgia Tech rushing, they're a triple option team. They ran for 320 yards. Their quarterback, Taquan Marshall, ran for 103 yards and 2 touchdowns. But for what it was, Pitt played well on offense. Georgia Tech, they're a triple option team. You kind of expect them to get about 300 yards rushing. But more so, it's the scoreboard at that point. You bend but don't break, and they didn't really break. Georgia Tech did put up 19, but most of it was later on in the game, actually after halftime. So Pitt had a nice victory there. All right, the UAB Blazers took on the Tulane Green Wave, and this was a pretty good game. It was kind of back and forth. UAB was up 21-7 at one point, but then in the third quarter, Tulane scored 14 points. UAB won, though, in the end, 31-24. Quarterback A.J. Early had a last-second touchdown pass. Maybe not last second, but a touchdown pass in the fourth quarter that enabled that victory. The running back for UAB, Spencer Brown, ran for 101 yards and a touchdown. Tulane, they just kind of, they put up like decent stats, and they put up 24 points, even though their quarterback, Jonathan Banks, he was 7-24, which is terrible. But it went for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their wide receiver, Darnell Mooney, had 123 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns on only 4 receptions. They ran for 175 as a team. Darius Bradwell had 90 yards and a touchdown. But UAB ended up winning that one, which was a pretty good game as I had suspected it might be. All right, the USF Bulls went up to Illinois to face the Illinois Fighting Illini out of the Big Ten, and USF was on the ropes for this game. Illinois was up 19-7 going into the fourth quarter, but Blake Barnett, man, he's looking good at quarterback. He did throw 2 interceptions, which some were tipped, but he still could have taken care of the ball a little bit better. But South Florida ended up coming back to win this game 25-19. Blake Barnett threw for 411 yards and 2 touchdowns. They had 2 guys go over 100 yards receiving. Randall St. Felix had 120 yards. Mitchell Wilcox, the tight end, actually had 109 yards. Darnell Solomon almost had 100 yards. He had 95 and 2 touchdowns. Jordan Cronkrite, who is a transfer from University of Florida, former Gator, he had his breakout game for USF, running for 136 and a touchdown. Illinois, they were able to move it early on, but USF's defense eventually did tighten up a little bit and stop them. They had a running back, Mike Epstein, ran for 113 and a touchdown. Their other running back, Reggie Corbin, ran for 98 yards and a touchdown. But, USF was able to come out with a victory. USF did have 5 sacks in the game, which helped them to come back with that win. All right, the Duke Blue Devils took on the Baylor Bears, and Duke won this game 40-27, even without their quarterback, Daniel Jones, who's out for some time. We're not sure yet. But the backup, Quentin Harris, came in. He was only 12 of 30, which isn't good. But for 174, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and added 83 yards rushing as well. So they pretty much did what they needed to do, and he helped them, put up 40 points on Baylor. They did have an interception return for a touchdown, so that helped them. Baylor, they did put up 27 points. Their quarterbacks, both Jalen McClendon and Charlie Brewer, combined for 270 yards, but they just couldn't really stop. One of the touchdowns was a block punt for Baylor, but congrats to Duke. They moved to 3-0 with a nice win there. All right, the Lehigh Mountain Hawks took on the Navy Midshipmen. This is pretty much all Navy. Navy 151-21. Lehigh could not stop their triple option at Navy. It was 21-7 after the first quarter. They ran for 484 yards as a team, Navy did. Their quarterback ran for 223 yards himself and 3 touchdowns. And yet they still had a guy go over 100 yards receiving. C.J. Williams, 3 catches, 104. Who would have seen that? At triple option, you don't normally have a 100-yard receiver. Lehigh, to their credit, they had a running back, Rashawn Allen, ran for 147 and 2 touchdowns, but it was Navy's day. They had 6 rushing touchdowns on the night. So the next one, Central Michigan Chippewas took on the Northern Illinois Huskies, and it was just a close game as I thought it would be 2 of the better teams in the MAC. Even though both of them were 0-2 going into the game, I felt like, and I still do feel like they'll both maybe be bowl teams and be good in the MAC conference. Northern Illinois ended up winning 24-16. Quarterback Marcus Childers, who was 11 of 18 for 109 yards, but he threw 3 touchdown passes, which is all you really need. He added 28 yards rushing. The running back Trey Harbison added 124 yards rushing. Central Michigan, they were down 21-3 at one point. Their quarterback Tony Poljan did not play well. They put in the backup Tommy Lazaro, who went for 128, a touchdown and pick. He ended up bringing them back to give them a chance to maybe tie at the end, but Northern Illinois ended up prevailing in that one. So Miami Ohio Redhawks, they took on the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and Minnesota won 26-3, kind of a ho-hum victory for them. But Minnesota doesn't normally have these kind of, quote, easy wins, and they got it moving to 3-0. Maybe the story was that their running back, Rodney Smith, he was normally hurt, and he normally plays. He was hurt, so the backup Bryce Williams came in, had 33 carries for 41 yards to pace them. Zach Innestead, the Minnesota quarterback, was 12 of 20 for 142, 2 touchdowns and no picks. Tyler Johnson at receiver had 133 yards receiving on 9 catches and 3 touchdown receptions. So they had a good game defensively and offensively to win that one. So the next game, Texas, San Antonio, UTSA Roadrunners took on the Kansas State Wildcats. And Kansas State, finally this year, they kind of put it together. They won 41-17. It seems like they might have found their quarterback. They had a bit of a back and forth between Skylar Thompson and Alex Delton. Skylar Thompson was 13 of 18 for 213 yards, 2 touchdowns, and ran for 66 yards in a touchdown. Alex Delton did, though, come in and complete his only pass for a 72-yard touchdown, so who knows. But Isaiah Zubair, the wide receiver, had 7 catches, 144, and 2 touchdowns himself for Kansas State. And they were to hold down UTSA pretty well, which they weren't a very good team to begin with. So the next game, Wofford went into Wyoming, and this was back and forth. Wofford was up 14-10. Wyoming, they scored a late touchdown to win 17-14. Tyler Vanderwall threw for 224, 2 touchdowns and a pick. They only ran for 89 yards as a team. Wofford has a triple option offense, which is what kind of helped them stay in this game for a little bit. They ran for 221 as a team, but Wyoming, it was just, kind of nice. They're kind of starting over offensively this year, and any victory is a good one for them right now to get them to 2-2. All right, the Bowling Green Falcons, they were in a shootout with Eastern Kentucky from the 1AA, but Bowling Green ended up winning 42-35. It was back and forth for the game. Darryl McCluskey for Eastern Kentucky, running back, ran for 168 yards and 3 touchdowns. They ran for 389 yards as a team. But Bowling Green, Jarrett Dagey had a really good game, 28 of 39, 258, 4 touchdowns. They're running, and he ran for another touchdown. Their running back, Andrew Clare, ran for 90 yards and a touchdown. And they were able to sneak out that victory, which Bowling Green right now, anyone they can get as well. But their offense is pretty potent, so the MAC might have some trouble with them. All right, the Colorado State Rams took on the Florida Gators, and luckily for Florida fans, they ended up winning. The Gators won 48-10. It wasn't really that close in the first quarter. It was 6-0, but by halftime it was 27-3. Colorado State has an offense that they can put up points. They had just beaten Arkansas the previous week, but the Gators, they played well on defense and special teams. Their offense, Felipe Franks, he was 8 of 15, 119, 2 touchdowns, but he threw an interception. He did start 8 of 9 though, and helped him get that early lead. But the Gators, they did have a block punt for a touchdown, and Freddie Swain returned a punt 85 yards for a touchdown, which was great. They ran for 222 yards as an offense. Damian Pierce had 5 carries for 87 yards and a touchdown. Jordan Scarlett had 6 carries for 56 yards and a touchdown. But for Colorado State, they did have a receiver, Preston Williams, go over 100 yards, 9 for 106. But the Gators were able to come out with the victory there with 5 sacks defensively to tune up for their conference game next week at Tennessee. One of the surprises of the day, North Texas Mean Green took on the Arkansas Razorbacks, and I did say that Arkansas should be ready because North Texas has a really good offense, and North Texas won 44-17. It was 34-10 at halftime for North Texas. It was not, something's wrong up there in Arkansas. Now, not to take anything away from North Texas, they're a good team, but this. It's one thing to upset them, but Arkansas shouldn't have lost by 27 points to North Texas. But they did. Mason Fine threw for 281 yards and a touchdown. They did have a pretty awesome punt return for a touchdown, where the guy, they had a pick six as well, but this guy Keegan Brewer, man, he had a 90-yard return for a touchdown, and if you haven't seen it, you should check out this clip. Maybe I'll put a link in the description or whatever, but he catches the punt. For some reason, Arkansas thought he called a fair catch. He just stood there kind of for a second. The Arkansas guy walks by him, and he takes off for a touchdown, for the long touchdown return. And at one point, he even said, one of the gunners that went down to tackle him walked by him and said, "Why didn't the whistle blow?" So it was a really risky move, but it ended up paying off for North Texas in the end. So maybe go check that out if you can't. Just look up North Texas punt return against Arkansas. Arkansas, though, they didn't. Their quarterback threw 4 interceptions. They threw 6 interceptions as a team. I'm just going to throw this. John Stephen Jones threw a pick 6. He's Jerry Jones' grandson, the owner of the Cowboys. All right. One of the games of the day, in my opinion, I love these games, back and forth. Texas Tech took on the Houston Cougars. Texas Tech won 63-49. It was 35-28 at halftime. It was 21-14 after the first quarter. This went back and forth. I don't even know where to start with these statistics. Let's start with the losing team. Let's work our way up. De'Aaron King, quarterback, 30-51, 431 yards passing, 5 touchdown passes, no interceptions, added 47 yards rushing and a touchdown. They ran for 173 as a team. Marquez Stevenson, their wide receiver, had 9 catches for 177, 2 touchdowns. Keith Corbin had 7 catches, 103 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And that was the losing team. Alan Bowman, he's a freshman. He set a Big 12 record for freshmen with passing with 605 passing yards. He was 43-59, 605, 5 touchdown passes himself, and no interceptions. Their running back, they don't really run that much at Texas Tech. Tejon Henry, 111 yards, 4 touchdown runs. They had a receiver, Antoine Wesley, set a school record with 261 receiving yards on 13 catches, 3 touchdowns. Jedion High, 7 catches, 120. DJ Vasher almost had 100 yards himself, 6 catches, 94 yards, and 2 touchdowns. It was just, there was no defense, and I love that. That's why I watch college football. These games right here give me that all the time, which it may happen next week. Texas Tech takes on Oklahoma State, 2 really powerful offenses. We may see another game that whoever gets the 61st wins. This is a great game going back and forth. All right, the Ohio Bobcats took on the Virginia Cavaliers, and this was a weird one because of Hurricane Florence going through the Carolinas and towards Virginia. They ended up moving this game to Vanderbilt, to the Vanderbilt Stadium. There was like 5,000 people there. It was just kind of an interesting situation, but the game ended up being a pretty good game. Virginia won 45-31. Their quarterback, Bryce Perkins, he was 25 of 30 for 379, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Running back Jordan Ellis ran for 171 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their wide receiver, Ole Miss, he set a record at Virginia with 247 receiving yards and had 2 touchdown receptions. Ohio, they put up 31 themselves. Their quarterback, Nathan Rourke, he threw for 246 and 2 touchdowns. He ran for 41 yards, but he had a 70-yard run at one point. But they take into consideration sacks when they do their rushing yards in this. Poppy White had 6 catches for 131 and a touchdown. Both teams had 3 sacks each, and it was a pretty entertaining game with Virginia coming out. All right, the Colorado Buffaloes took on 1AA New Hampshire Wildcats. Colorado, they won 45-14 in this game. Steven Montez, 14 of 19, 166, a touchdown to pick. The running game for Colorado was kind of the story with this one. They ran for 311 yards as a team. Trayvon McMillan had 162 yards and 2 touchdowns, and most of that was in the first quarter himself. They were just kind of able to do what they needed to do. They had 5 sacks as a defense in this, and they came out with the win to move to 3-0. The Cal Golden Bears took on the Idaho State Bengals from 1AA. Cal won 45-23. Although it was a little bit closer, it was kind of back and forth a little bit, but Cal ended up winning. Jay Scarver is at quarterback, 20 of 25, 224, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. They ran for 213 yards as a team. They had 4 sacks. Ashton Davis, he was one of the talks of the game. He had a kick return for a touchdown, and he ended up having an interception as well on defensively. So Cal, they held down Ohio State. Even though Ohio State, they had a receiver, Mitch Goller, had 156 yards receiving a touchdown, but that was mostly it for them. All right, Bethune-Cookman went on to take on the Florida Atlantic Owls. Florida Atlantic poured it on. They are up 29-0 after the first quarter, and they end up winning 49-28. Devin Singletary, running back, he's just setting more records. He did only run for 84 yards, but 5 rushing touchdowns, which was a school record in the first half. And he has set a USA record with 16 consecutive games with a touchdown run. The quarterback didn't look very good. They didn't have another running back, Kareth White, run for 100 yards. They ran for 376 yards as a team. And they were, Bethune-Cookman put up 28 themselves. But it was really, after one quarter, it's 29-0. So Florida Atlantic has a big game next week, though, against the UCF Knights. Actually on Thursday. It's a Thursday game, and that could be a shootout. Both teams have really good offenses. And UCF is ranked, and they should not look past Florida Atlantic. They're looking pretty good. So I'll break that down in my previews later. Eastern Michigan Eagles took on the Buffalo Bulls, and this is a close game like I thought it might be. The Bulls ended up winning 35-28. Tyree Jackson, the quarterback for Buffalo, threw for 325, 3 touchdowns. And the wide receiver, I keep touting Anthony Johnson as being the wide receiver for the Bulls. He's an All-American, and he had an okay game, but, maybe because of him, another receiver was able to step up and had 7 catches for 188 yards and 3 touchdowns himself. That's KJ Osborne, and they needed all of it because they only won by 7. Mike Glass III, the quarterback for Eastern Michigan, he threw for 284, 2 touchdowns, added 69 yards rushing and a touchdown. Blake Banham had 159 receiving yards and a touchdown in that game, but the Bulls were able to come out with that, and they moved to 3-0. All right, the Texas State Bobcats and the South Alabama Jaguars. This one went back and forth. Texas State was up 17-3 after one quarter. Then at halftime, it was 24-16, and then USA ended up scoring, USA. South Alabama ended up scoring 18 points in the fourth quarter alone, as South Alabama won 41-31. They were aided by an interception return for a touchdown. They had 3 sacks as a team. Their quarterback, Evan Orth, he had a solid game, 24 of 33, 266, 2 touchdowns. Added 21 rushing. Jamarius Way, 11 receptions, 173 and a touchdown. Texas State, Willie Jones III, passed for 205, 2 touchdowns, added 58 and a touchdown. It was a back and forth game, and USA was able to go from 0-2 and win their first game of the year. All right, Delaware State Hornets, the one that really took on Western Michigan. Boy, Western Michigan stepped on their throat and did not look back. Western Michigan hung up 68. They won 68-0. They had 2 punt returns in this game by 2 different people, which it's rare enough to have 2 punt returns in a game, and then you do it with 2 different people. That's just unheard of. John Watson, he passed for 286 yards and 2 touchdowns. They ran for 241 as a team. They held They held Delaware to 8 yards passing, 115 yards. It was just, Western Michigan pretty much could not do anything wrong in this game. They also had a fumble return for a touchdown. It was ugly. All right, Arkansas State Red Wolves took on the Tulsa Golden Hurricane, and Arkansas State, they did have a safety in this game, and they had an interception return in this game, which pretty much was the difference because they won 29-20. So the pick six, that's 7 points. The safety was 9. So really, Tulsa, they had it close in this game. Luke Skipper at quarterback for Tulsa passed for 172 and a touchdown. Shamar Brooks ran for 115 yards, but they went over to prevail. They made just a few too many mistakes in the end. They held down Justice Hansen at quarterback for Arkansas State. He's normally one of the top quarterbacks in the country statistically, but he only passed for 191. But Arkansas State got the win with that. Alabama A&M 1AA took on Cincinnati Bearcats, and Bearcats, they're up 28-0 after one quarter. Cincinnati won 63-7. Desmond Ridder, a freshman quarterback, he was 9 of 10 for 199 and 3 touchdown passes. It's crazy. He had more touchdown passes than he did incompletions. And he added a touchdown rushing. As a team, they had 2 guys go over 100 yards rushing. Tavian Thomas, 141, 2 touchdowns. Charles McClellan, 121 and a touchdown. They ran for 409 yards as a team. Cincinnati, they were not expected to be very good going in after last season, after the way they looked last season. But they're 3-0 now, and they're looking strong every which way. All right, one of the better games of the day. A shootout. Oregon State Beavers took on the Nevada Wolfpack, Pac-12 against Mountain West. Nevada won 37-35, and now it was a game. Nevada was up 30-7 at one point. They kind of lit up a little bit. Oregon State came back, and Oregon State had a chance to win with a field goal at the end with 0 seconds left, and they missed it. Nevada, Ty Ganji, their quarterback, he threw for 195 and 2 touchdowns. They ran for 156 yards. As a team, they had 5 sacks defensively, which helped them in that. Oregon State, they started at quarterback with Connor Blunt. He passed for 175 and a touchdown, but then backup Jake Luton come in. He passed for 284, touchdown. He brought him back. Jamar Jefferson at running back ran for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. They had Isaiah Hodgins, 14 catches, 200 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The 14 catches, though, tied him with the school record with Mike Hass and Brandon Hooks. Most of you probably don't know Mike Hass. He's one of the best wide receivers ever to play in the Pac-12. Definitely at Oregon State, but the Pac-12 period, he set all kinds of records, or at the time it was the Pac-10. And most NFL people know Brandon Cooks, one of the better receivers in the league. So he was able to tie that school record with them, which says something good about him, I think. Timmy Hernandez had 11 catches himself for 116 yards. It was, it was a back and forth. It ended up being a bit of a back and forth game that Nevada held on to win with. All right, the Iowa Hawkeyes took on the Northern Iowa Panthers from 1AA. Iowa, they won 38-14. Nate Stanley at quarterback threw for 309 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. They ran for 207 yards. Nick Easley had 10 catches for 103 yards and a touchdown. Noah Fant, he's a tight end. He had 5 catches, 99 yards and a touchdown. He set the Iowa record for touchdown receptions by a tight end. He's got 14 in his career, which is saying something because there's Tony Moiaki came from Iowa, CJ Fedorowicz, George Kittle, he's playing right now. I know there's one more that I'm forgetting. Scott Chandler, so Iowa is known for these really good tight ends, and it looks like they have the next one in Noah Fant there. Iowa, it was 38-14, which doesn't sound like a lot, but their defense has been playing great all year. They had allowed 10 points all season coming into this game, and had a shutout until the fourth quarter. And Northern Iowa ended up scoring 14 in the fourth quarter. And Iowa, they're up 38-0, and normally, these kind of games are the ones that Iowa. This is a blowout for Iowa. I mean, it is a blowout, but most of the time, when you're a really good team from one of these top conferences and they play one AA team, you shoot up 38-0 at halftime. Most fans expect that. But Iowa is kind of different. The way they do it, they've always played defense, a good running game. They don't normally put up 50-something points. And so Iowa actually looked, pretty good in this game. And they take on Wisconsin next week, which should be interesting. All right, the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers took on the Louisville Cardinals. And Western Kentucky, they had their shot for a little bit of an upset. They were up 17-3 at one point in this game. And Louisville was able to come back. They scored 14 points in the fourth quarter. Jawan Pass couldn't get anything going, so they brought in Malik Cunningham, who was 10 of 18 for 88 yards, and ran for 129 yards. Dave Williams had 2 rushing touchdowns, and Louisville ended up winning this game 20-17. Western Kentucky, they had their shots. They were up, but they just could not hold on. And Louisville, they're struggling. They won 2 games so far. They did win, but they're struggling. I don't know if they'll make a bowl. We'll see. Their offense does not look very good, but maybe they needed a change of quarterback, and maybe Malik Cunningham is it. I guess, I know it's cliche, but time will literally tell. Well, not literally, but time will tell with this one. All right, one of the best games of the day, Missouri Tigers took on the Purdue Boilermakers, and it was shootout back and forth. Missouri ended up winning 40-37 on a last-second field goal, and Missouri was up. They were up 10 at one point. Purdue came back to tie it. He went back up 10. Purdue came back to tie it. David Blau, the quarterback for Purdue, 39-55, 572 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. They had 3 guys go over 100 yards receiving. Rondell Moore, 11 catches, 137, a touchdown. Bryson Hopkins, 5 catches, 136, and a touchdown. And Isaac Zico, 4 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown. But Missouri, they came out with the win. Drew Lock, 26-43, 375, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. He's looked really good. He added a rushing touchdown. Larry Roundtree III added 168 yards rushing. Jalen Knox had 5 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown himself. And it was just one of those. It was a fun game, back and forth, which was kind of expected at Purdue. And but Missouri had a nice win. All right, Louisiana Monroe Warhawks took on the Texas A&M Aggies. This wasn't. I mean, it was kind of close, but it was A&M all the way. They won 48-10. Kellen Mond threw for 210, a touchdown, added 67 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Travion Williams at running back ran for 128 yards and a touchdown. And they came out healthy, which is big, because Texas A&M takes on Alabama next weekend. And I'll break that down in my previews later. UL Monroe, they weren't really able to do a whole lot in this game. Texas A&M had four sacks themselves. So the next game, UMass took on Florida International Golden Panthers, and FIU, they poured it on them. They won 63-24. Which ties their program record for points in a game, which they set last year against UMass. So apparently the Minutemen bring out the best in their offense. I don't know. James Morgan at quarterback threw for 207 and 2 touchdowns. They ran for 329 yards as a team. They had 2 guys go over 100 yards rushing. Shondarius Phillips, 117 rushing and 2 touchdowns. And Napoleon Maxwell, 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. They had 5 rushing touchdowns. Defensively, they had 3 sacks. They had an interception return for a touchdown by Rocky Jacques Louis. UMass, they ran for 199 yards as a team. They threw for 224 as a team, but they put up 24 points, which, their defense just could not stop Florida International. All right. So one of the upsets of the day, Akron Zips from the MAC took on Northwestern Wildcats, one of the better teams in the Big Ten. They won 10 games last year. Akron won 39-34. After they were down 21-3 at one point, and in the third quarter alone put up 23 points. They had 3 defensive touchdowns. Let's start there. Ulysses Gilbert III, one of the best linebackers to ever play at Akron. He had over 140 tackles last year and over 120 the year before. He had a fumble return for a touchdown. He recovered a fumble in the end zone for a touchdown. But cornerback Alvin Davis for Akron, he had 2 interceptions, returned both for touchdowns. One 97 yards for a touchdown and one 50 yards for a touchdown, which is what helped them to come back and win this game. Quarterback Cato Nelson for Akron, he had a good game himself, 277 and 2 touchdowns and added 37 yards rushing. Northwestern Clayton Thorson, he threw for 383 yards and 3 touchdowns, but the 2 picks were costly. They would have won if he'd thrown even just one of the interceptions, probably anyway. Wide receiver Cameron Green had 11 catches for 125 and 2 touchdowns. It was actually a pretty fun game to watch, going both ways. 39-34, a bunch of points being scored, but Akron's defense, they came through there, man. They put up 21 points on their own with that one. All right, New Mexico took on the Mexico State Aggies, New Mexico Lobos, in-state rivalry. New Mexico, they were down 17-7. New Mexico came back and ended up winning 42-25. They had a late interception return for a touchdown, which made that final margin. They had 5 overall interceptions as a defense. Their quarterback, Sharian Jones, 12-19, 127. But they, as a team, they ran for 198 yards. Tyrone Owens ran for 110 yards and a touchdown. They had 3 sacks defensively. New Mexico State, they've been kind of going back and forth with their quarterback situation. They had Josh Atkins, 12-21, 168 touchdown, but he threw 2 picks. Matt Romero, the normal starter, 9-13, 75 yards, but he threw 2 interceptions. They were able to put up some, 25 points, but New Mexico seemed to be too much for them in this game. It's kind of funny because New Mexico State actually started the game with an interception return for a touchdown, and then New Mexico ended the game with an interception return for a touchdown. So it's kind of an interesting bookend there. All right, Eastern Washington, Wendeley took on Washington State Cougars, and Eastern Washington is normally one of the better teams in Wendeley. They did beat Washington State two years ago. But this was all Washington State. Washington won 59-24. Gardner Minshew, 45-57, 470 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Their backup came in. Trey Tinsley threw a touchdown pass. Gardner Minshew, he's a transfer from ECU, and he's been lighting it up, man. Washington State takes on USC, and I'm already saying it now. I think Cougars win. I think people will know about Gardner Minshew after this game. But you heard it here first. So here's the weird thing. And this is what Washington State does. Mike Leach, he passes it. As a team, they passed for 524 yards, right? They ran it for 41. And yet, they had 4 rushing touchdowns. James Williams had 6 carries, 19 yards, but 3 of them were for touchdowns. So basically, they pass it all over the field. They can pass it, long touchdown passes. If they get there, then, they got somebody that can put it in the end zone then. Devontavian Martin had 13 catches, 149 yards, and a touchdown. The Washington State, their offense has looked really good. It hasn't been against great competition, but the world, I'm telling you, watch out. I'll break it down more in my preview, but they'll show some people this weekend. Just to throw out Eastern Washington, Gabe Gubron, who's 14 of 36, which is not very good, 231, 3 touchdowns, but did throw 3 interceptions. He threw 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So Washington State just had a good overall game offensively. defensively. They did have a 100-yard return for a touchdown, so even special teams chipped in. All right, Winnipeg Prairie View A&M took on UNLV from the Mountain West. UNLV, it was their game from the start. They were up 20-0 after one quarter. They won 46-17. Armani Rogers passed for 130 and a touchdown, added 122 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. Lex Thomas, I keep messing his name up. Lexington Thomas, just call him Lex Luthor, Lex Thomas, whatever you want. He had 124 yards and a touchdown. He's one of the best running backs in the Mountain West, if not the group of 5. For Prairie View, their quarterback, 11 of 37, which is freaking terrible, but 238, 2 touchdowns. They had a receiver, Kalen Riles, 4 catches, 134. But, UNLV, they look pretty strong. Maybe they can sneak into a bowl or contend for the Mountain West. Who knows? All right, the Fresno State Bulldogs. Oh, man, they took on the UCLA Bruins. And I knew when I picked this game, I even said Fresno State's look good and UCLA's look terrible. But I was like giving the benefit of the doubt to Chip Kelly at UCLA, and I picked UCLA, and I should not have done that. Fresno State killed them. It was 38-14. It probably shouldn't have been that close. Marcus McMaryion at quarterback for Fresno State, 22-33, 270, a touchdown, no interceptions. And he ran for 4 touchdowns himself. They ran for 150 yards as a team. The quarterback for UCLA, he's a freshman, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, but he was 10 of 24, 151, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. UCLA, man, I believe in Chip Kelly. I really like Chip Kelly. I wanted him with Florida. If not with Florida, I wanted him to maybe even go back to Oregon. But, UCLA this season, man, they don't look good. But Fresno State, they do look good, and they're definitely one of the contenders in the Mountain West. All right, our final game of the night, Southern Utah took on the Arizona Wildcats. Khalil Tate, he was kind of injured a little bit. He couldn't run, but he did it all passing as Arizona won 62-31. Khalil Tate, 13 of 20, 349, 5 touchdown passes. No interceptions. Tony Ellison had 111 yards receiving and a touchdown. Sean Brown had 97 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. They had J.J. Taylor, who's normally the running back. He had a kick return for a touchdown. But their offense, they couldn't be stopped. But, Southern Utah did put up 31 points themselves. Chris Helbig, 270 yards, passing, a touchdown pick. But it was all Arizona from there. So that's it for my Week 4 reviews. Go to our Twitter. It'll be up there somewhere. Like our channel. Go to it, subscribe to our channel, like it, share it with a bunch of people if you know people that are really interested in these in-depth reviews. I'll have my previews coming. We'll drop our picks for the week, our college picks, our NFL picks. So peace.